Welcome to Issues That Matter. I'm Cynthia Pooler. My guest today is Howie Hawkins, who ran for president 4 years ago on the Green Party line. And he's here to talk about the petitioning process in New York State. It really is difficult for a third party candidate to get on the ballot, right? Right, Howie?
Yeah, they changed the law in 2020. It was already hard in New York, but they basically more than tripled the requirements to stay on the ballot and get on the ballot. It was a bill attached to the budget bill in 2020 during the COVID lockdown when the legislature was meeting remotely. And that's a must-pass bill. So this change was passed with little debate. Now, the major parties who have a ballot line don't have to petition. It's only us little guys. They just have a convention and put their candidate on the ballot. But in New York, they increased the requirement to stay on the ballot, which was 50,000 votes for governor before 2020, and made it 2% of all the votes, which in 2020 was 173,000. So that's more than 3 times the number of votes you need. And in the history of the Green Party, only Ralph Nader in 2000 and me in 2014 running for governor have got more than 173,000 votes. So, you know, it really makes it difficult for us. And in addition, okay, if you don't get the ballot line retained, then you got to petition. So they increased the number of signatures you need from 15,000 in 42 days to 45,000 in 42 days. That is by far the hardest petition in the United States. And from my research, it's the hardest in the world. The nearest one I can find is in Putin's Russia. If you want to run from an oblast, which is like a state, for their Duma, their Congress, it's a statewide, petition, it's 15,045 days. That's close to our old standard of 15,042 days. And I've tried to get this law changed talking to state legislators, and I joke with them, just get us back to the Putin standard. We can work with that. And they chuckle, but they always have an excuse why they haven't done it. So we don't have a law yet introduced to get back to a more reasonable standard. So they tripled the votes, more than tripled the votes, more than tripled the signatures. And then you got to get a distribution of your signatures in the congressional districts. Half the congressional districts. Used to be 100 signatures in half the congressional districts. Now it's 500 signatures in the congressional districts. So that's an increase of 5 times. And then they doubled the frequency we have to qualify for the ballot from every 4 years in the governor's race to every 2 years. And it's only the governor's office or the presidential office. So other states have other ways of getting on the ballot. You can do a party petition just to put your party on the ballot, and then you can nominate your candidates. And in those states, you have months, sometimes 2 years, sometimes no limit to get enough signatures. Here, it's all compressed into 45 days for an office, and then you have to get a vote. Other states also allow you to maintain a ballot line by having a minimum number of voters registered into the party with the state, what we call enrolled voters. And they allow, in terms of qualifying your ballot line for future elections, they allow not just governor or president, but other statewide offices like attorney general, comptroller, U.S. senator, secretary of state in some states, and so forth. So the result of this election change is that in 2022, we only had 2 candidates, the Democratic and the Republican candidates, on the ballot for all statewide offices. That was the first time since 1946, and the only other time since secret ballots published by the state were introduced in 1891, that only a Democrat and Republican was on the ballot for governor. And it's the only time since 1891, since the secret ballot was introduced, that only Democrats and Republicans are on the ballot for all the statewide offices. So this really, eliminates third parties. It wiped us out in 2020. And, Cuomo was mad, I think, because when I was the Green candidate for governor in 2014, I got 5% of the vote. And he wanted to run up the vote to get ready for a possible presidential bid in 2016. Wanted to get more than his daddy, Mario, ever got. He wanted to get more than he got in 2010, and he got less. And we're sitting there with 5%, and he was mad. Now, the media will tell you he was angry at the Working Families Party, but the Working Families Party never took any votes from him. They always put him on a general election ballot. The only time they challenged him in a primary was 2018 with Cynthia Nixon. 2014, they didn't back Zephyr Teachout. So he really didn't have much to complain about from the Working Families Party. And in fact, after the 2020 election, when all the independent parties were wiped out and only the Democrats, Republicans, and the two parties that cross-endorsed Democrats and Republicans, namely the Working Families Party and the Conservative Party, they survived. And Cuomo said, that's what we wanted. So he really wasn't after the Working Families Party. Jay Jacobs, the Democratic Party chair, said, yeah, that's what we wanted, because we wanted to get rid of what he called the transactional parties, namely the Green Party and the Libertarian Party, which actually run their own candidates. It's the Working Families Party and the Conservative parties that are transactional because they bargain the ballot line for, policy commitments from their candidates. So, it was basically to get the Greens off the ballot from the Democratic point of view. And so here we are in 2024.
Mhm.
And now we just yesterday, May 28th, independent candidates for president submitted their petitions.
Mhm.
And it doesn't look, it looks tough. I mean, Robert Kennedy Jr., he spent, according to the New York Post, reporting what Kennedy's campaign said. They spent $1.1 million, more than $1.1 million, paying petitioners $90 an hour to get their signatures. They submitted over 135,000 signatures. But Kennedy, and I'm glad he's doing this, is one thing I like about him. He's suing New York in federal court because this is a ridiculous standard. And, maybe the Greens will join as a friend of the court or join in the lawsuit because this is just anti-democratic. So that made it hard for the Greens to hire petition management firms because Kennedy bought them all up, not just, in New York, but he's doing this all across the country. So he claims to have submitted 135,000 signatures. If he did, he'd probably get on the ballot. I don't know what the Greens submitted. We submitted 53 bound volumes with 5,678 pages at the office of the Board of Election, and 30 more volumes were mailed before they were postmarked yesterday, so they'll reach the Board of Election. So I don't know how many total pages. We had 5 signatures a page. So hopefully we got over 45,000. And there may be litigation. We may be challenged. The Democrats want to knock us off the ballot. They have 3 days to file a general objection, and then 3 more days to file specific objections, where they go line by line and say why they think the signatures are no good. Or what they may do is say, we don't have 500 in one of the congressional districts, 500 signatures in one of the congressional districts we claimed we did. I mean, it's an enormous job to get these signatures to one place, then identify the signatures by congressional district, and then give the Board of Election, not just the petition, but a complicated schedule as to where these signatures are. So that's where we're at. Hopefully we'll have Jill Stein, our likely presidential candidate, on the ballot, but at this point, we don't know.
So when a candidate who's running for statewide office, if he goes to an event, let's just say that New York State Fair, right? Okay, so people from all over the state will be going to that fair in isn't it in Syracuse?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's in Syracuse. So there might be people from every single congressional district there. So that person is not going to say, what county are you from? They're going to get it all on one page, right?
Yeah. So the congressional districts are mixed up on every page.
Right. So,
And, we can't petition at the state fair. It's very hard to find places where people are that you can petition. If it's a grocery store, most of them will kick you out of the parking lot. It's private property. Uh, you can't do it at post offices. You can do it out on the sidewalk, but most of the post offices have their parking inside, on the inside of the parking of the sidewalk. They don't, so don't have a lot of traffic there. So it's very limited as to where you can even find people to ask to sign your petitions. Going door to door, is slower than if you're in a high volume area. So a lot of our petitions come from the New York City area where a lot of people walk. They get out the subway and they walk to their job or to whatever they're going to. So you can find places in New York City, but upstate it's difficult. We tend to hit the farmers markets. Sometimes I know in Syracuse they had like a crawfish fry at the central square in the city of Syracuse. So I was able to petition there. That was probably my best place to petition. But it's, that's another thing people don't realize. It's hard to even find the public out there on the street. People drive, particularly upstate, and there's not a lot of walking to do.
so tell me a little bit about what Robert Kennedy used, what firms he used to get the qualifying number to be on the ballot.
Well, there's a little industry of firms that have regular full-time professional petitioners, and they work pretty much year round. They do ballot initiatives in states that have that. They do candidate petitioning. And it's a small industry, so that it's not like, there are firms everywhere.
Okay, well, stop right there. It's a small industry, and Kennedy knew where to go and who to contact. From our initial conversation this morning, I was under the impression that he got to all these places before Jill did. And that's unbelievable, unbelievable that, and these agencies, they don't want things changed. They make money from that. So here somebody gets to them first, gets the money, and whoever goes second or third is out of luck.
Yeah, it's not hard to find these firms. They advertise, you can find them. But he got out early because he has to get on the ballot in all 50 states. And
But
he
so
has
does
millions and millions.
Jill.
Yeah, but we started with 21 states where the Greens are already on the ballot.
Okay.
Some states are much more reasonable than New York, so we can do it just with Green volunteers. But when it came to New York, we had to hire. And when we went out into the market, we found out Kennedy had, swept up a lot of these firms. We did find 3, is my understanding. But you sign a contract, the firm doesn't always come through. So I don't know, how well it worked. I heard mixed reports on the 3 different firms we hired. But in a way, we're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel because Kennedy already, hired the reputable, experienced firms apparently. So yeah, that's another thing that makes it hard for the little guy. I mean, Kennedy's got, these super PACs backing him with people that also donate to Trump, a bunch of right wingers. He picked his running mate, who's a billionaire.
Mhm.
Got her money from one of those tech guys she used to be married to. And she's pouring millions into the campaign. So, money's not an object for Kennedy in terms of getting on the ballot. But for a scrappy campaign, that depends on small donors like the Greens do, that
Mhm.
doesn't have a super PAC on principle because the super PACs don't have to report where their money's coming from. There's ways around that. So, yeah, it's tough. And, back to New York, I mean, the Democrats who got this law passed, it was Kennedy, it was Cuomo and Jay Jacobs, and the Democratic legislators, for the most part, went along. they're the ones that set it up in New York, and they're ultimately responsible for the mess we're in terms of fair ballot access.
You know what I find extremely amusing about that was before Chris Cuomo was kicked out of his job on CNN, he would talk about multi-party campaigns where it was more than just the Democrats and Republicans. He claimed on TV he wanted many parties running for different offices. At the same time, his brother was trying to kill off, all the third party candidates. That's pretty, uh, it's terrible.
Well, I think Chris Cuomo's pandering to his audience. The American people do want a multi-party democracy. The Gallup polls, the last two, had 62, 63% of Americans saying we need a third major party. They're not satisfied with what the Democrats and Republicans are offering.
Mm-hmm.
So, Chris Cuomo's pandering to his audience.
Right. But at the same time, he was very disingenuous because his brother was trying to kill off all the third parties. And he comes on TV and espouses, oh, we need more parties in elections. I thought that was pretty disingenuous.
Yeah, Andrew Cuomo's got a different audience. That's his donors and maintaining power, and that's why he got the election law changed. But he had other problems, and he resigned in disgrace. So, they both resigned in disgrace or were booted out in disgrace. So,
Mm-hmm.
I guess it doesn't fall the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Mm-hmm. So, people don't know about these firms that a candidate with big money can come in and, the average person doesn't even, isn't even aware of the petitioning process, let alone all the intricacies of it. So, what's somebody like you or Jill or anybody else who's interested in elected politics to do about that?
Well, you're right about people not knowing the process. I mean, my first line when I approach people, would you help us with a signature to put the Green Party back on the ballot? And that would stop people in their tracks. What? The Green Party's on the ballot? A lot of people in Syracuse know me. Howie, I just voted for you. I said, the last time I was on the ballot was 2020. It's been 4 years. They changed the law. And people, then they're kind of outraged. It's like, that's not right. So they'll sign the petition. But you're right. People don't know the intricacies
Mm-hmm.
of getting on the ballot. They think,
Right,
most people think, if you want to run, you just run.
right.
And they'll put you on the ballot. It's not like that. They have real barriers to getting candidates on the ballot. It's not like we had too many candidates on the ballot before this election law change. I mean, for most offices, it's just the Democrats and Republicans. For a lot of times, it's, just a Democrat or a Republican in many districts. There's just no opposition. And when, third parties are involved, it's, the Greens and the Libertarians mostly. Now, our ballot line was a little more crowded because we have fusion. So parties like the Conservatives and the Working Families Party routinely cross-endorse the Democrats and Republicans, respectively. So, what we got now is 4 ballot lines and 2 candidates in most races. And it's, most people, they go in and vote, they look at the candidates, they don't know who they are. They either lean Democrat or Republican, so they usually, tick one of those boxes. If Barack Obama was on the Republican ballot, a lot of Republicans would vote for him. And if George W. Bush or Donald Trump was on the Democratic line, people would tick that box too.
You think so?
Yeah, because they don't look at the candidates or they don't know who they are. Let's put it that way. I guess maybe not so much with Donald Trump because everybody knows who he is. But yeah, they would vote for Democrats on the Republican line and Republicans on the Democratic line if they're on there and they didn't know who the candidates were. Because the party is a shorthand for a lot of voters because they haven't researched the candidates and their positions.
So we're basically talking about what's going on in New York State. Is it easier to get on the ballot in other states, or are there roadblocks there too?
They're roadblocks, but they're much lower. Take New Jersey next door. It's 800 signatures compared to 45,000 in New York. In Connecticut, I think it's 3,000 or 5,000. Massachusetts, 10,000. Vermont, 1,000. So, and then in states like California, we just have to maintain a minimum number of enrolled voters. So, we easily do that. And then in other states, you have much longer to get your signatures. There are states like, Alabama and Illinois and Indiana that have pretty high thresholds like we do, but they have like 2 years in most cases to get their signatures. Illinois, it's 3 months, so it's a little shorter. Illinois is a tough state, but all of them are easier than New York.
Hmm. But for a candidate who wants to put an organization together and they're begging people to sign their petition, that's no way to run a democracy.
No, and petitioning for Green Party presidential candidates is where we spend most of our money, most of our volunteer energy, just to get on the ballot. Instead of putting that money and energy into a field operation, media outreach, and messaging. So it's just to get on the damn ballot. So, then when we're on the ballot, the media is kind of obligated to give us at least some coverage. If
Right.
we're not on the ballot, they're going to totally ignore us.
Which is basically what they do now, right?
Well, the larger scale the election, the more we get ignored. So, if we run a green for a city council or a town council, to the extent the media covers those races, we get pretty good coverage. Depends on the candidate, how well they do, relating to the media, giving them good stories to write about. But you can break through that. But when it gets to the state level in New York, I mean, it's a very tough media environment. You basically have New York City, which is, the media there is nationally focused, internationally focused, or New York City focused, but not very state focused. The state media coverage mostly comes out of Albany. But of course, all the media tends to cover the races. First of all, you're serious if you raise a lot of money. If you're a grassroots campaign, they don't take you seriously. And then they cover the horse race. What do the polls say? Rather than what the candidates say about the policies. So if you're not up in the polls, you don't get covered. If you don't get covered, you don't go up in the polls. So it's a chicken and the egg problem for us. What we've got to do is have a much stronger ground game with, building a local organization so that, Greens are going door to door and talking to people, and they know the Greens are out there, even if we're not on the nightly news. That's what it's going to take, along with, changing our electoral system so it will accommodate a multi-party democracy that's inclusive. What we have now is winner-take-all elections, which create exclusive two-party systems.
Right.
Because the plurality wins. And for the Greens, progressives are afraid of spoiling the election for the Democrats so the Republican gets in. So they don't want to vote for the Greens, even when they like them more than the Democrats. That, if we can get that changed through ranked choice voting and proportional representation in legislative bodies, then the politics of this country will change, and the Greens will have a voice proportional to their support in society, in government, and the whole debate will change.
Now, how long has the Greens been working on the ranked choice voting?
Well, really, since we started, it began when we went into the year 2000. We had 2 jurisdictions left that did ranked choice voting, and there have been about 24 cities that had it coming out of the progressive era, including New York City, Long Beach, and Yonkers in New York State. But in the Cold War, they got rid of them because the Democrats were saying it was a communist thing to have ranked choice voting. You know, Robert Moses, the big developer down there in New York
Yep.
City. I mean, he was saying when they had the campaign to repeal it in New York City, that this is what the communists do in East Germany. And in fact, that's a one-party state. You know, they didn't have proportional representation. It was West Germany that had proportional representation. But it was just flat out lies, and the Red Scare, and people were not thinking straight. They got scared. So even the Republicans voted to repeal ranked choice voting and proportional representation in New York City. Before they had that, the Republicans had like one representative on the city council out of 25 councilors. When they went to proportional representation, they increased the number of councilors to 50 something. And the Republicans got 25% of the councilors because that was their support in the city. By getting rid of ranked choice voting, they were reduced back to 1 or 2 councilors. It's like they shot themselves in the head. It was stupid. So anyway, we went into 2000 with only 2 jurisdictions still doing it. Cambridge, Massachusetts, and a little town in Maryland. And then by 2020, we had 24 jurisdictions doing it. And the way those jurisdictions, it was the Greens in the San Francisco Bay Area that first got it in San Francisco, and then Berkeley, and then Oakland, and other cities there that really got it, the movement for ranked choice voting going. And Greens have been supporting it. So by 2020, we had 24 jurisdictions. Going into 2024, we have now over 50 jurisdictions, including 2 states, Maine and Alaska. Excuse me. And then ranked choice voting is going to be on the ballot statewide in Colorado and Oregon, and probably also in, Nevada and Oregon, and probably also in Colorado, Idaho, and District of Columbia. So this is a reform that's accelerating, it's gaining momentum. And the Greens, yeah, we're right in the middle of that. We're really pushing hard on that.
So what do you see? What do you see as 2024 evolves from your perspective?
Well, it's really hard to say given, you know, Trump's criminal problems, Biden's problems in Gaza. I mean, both of those candidates could shed a lot of support, which means alternative candidates could get more support than they have in recent elections. On the other hand, the dynamic of, you know, voting for the lesser evil, you know, for both the right and the left means that, you know, people are going to come back to Biden or Trump. And so the minor parties are going to get minor results. I mean, those are the 2 kind of scenarios. The Kennedy campaign is something of a wild card because people don't know where he stands. They just know he's a Kennedy. And for a lot of people, that's, you know, they feel good about that because of John Kennedy and Robert Kennedy from their point of view. So I think it's, you know, you're asking me to predict. I'm not going to, because there's just too many things up in the air, and it's still early. You know, people are freaking out at polls now in May. You know, you really got to start paying attention in after Labor Day. And that's when things will start to settle in, and people are going to decide whether they're going to cast a protest vote for a minor party candidate, or they're going to cast a defensive vote for one of the major party candidates.
Given the fact that a lot of people are hurting today, do you think that many people might vote for a third party candidate because they know that either major party isn't really serving them very well?
Well,
I think that's the bottom line, right?
Well, the polls show that the top issues, the economy, and then economic issues, you know, like healthcare, cost of housing, cost of food. But a lot of people are going to vote defensively. You know, if they're progressives, they're going to vote for Biden because Trump will be worse. And if they're conservatives, you know, they're going to see the Democrats are going to tax them, so they're going to vote for Trump because he says he's going to cut their taxes. I think the economic issues is not what's pushing people to the minor parties. For the Greens, it's, you know, the atrocious genocidal war in Gaza, which is a lot of progressives outraged, and groups like Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims. So, the Greens may pick up votes from those quarters on that issue. But again, who knew this would be the central issue for a lot of progressives before October 7th? So, other events can happen between now and November. So that's why I say it's still early, and it's really hard to predict.
Okay. So, as the election season unfolds, I'll give you a call and possibly we could do another show between now and November, or 2 or 3 shows.
Sure, anytime.
So you've been listening to Howie Hawkins, who ran for president 4 years ago on the Green Party line. I'm Cynthia Pooler. If you like this show, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Howie, it's going to be an interesting 5 months.
It is.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a great day.